Over 7 million vehicles were imported into the United States in the past year alone. And now every one of them faces the threat of a 25% import tariff.
What we're going to be doing is a 25% tariff on all cars that are not made in the United States. If they're made in the United States,
if this becomes law, what happens next could send shockwaves through the auto industry. For American consumers, it could mean direct financial pain. With more than 7 million foreign vehicles sold in the United States last year, it's clear how much the country relies on international car makers. But a proposed 25% tariff could turn the entire market upside down. A shakeup may be imminent. Automakers are expected to react fast. Some might cut back on buyer incentives, while others may suspend shipments altogether, particularly for vehicles designed specifically for U.S. buyers. The most immediate consequence? A sharp jump in new car prices. Today's average of $49,000 could climb to $52,000 or even $53,000. That price hike could force millions of Americans to put their car buying plans on hold or turn to used vehicles instead. And if that shift gains traction, the broader economy could start to slow, with effects rippling far beyond the car lot. Calls to bring auto manufacturing back to U.S. soil are growing louder. But while the idea sounds simple, putting it into practice is anything but. Even in ideal conditions, building a new auto plant can take 2.5 to 3.5 years before it's up and running. And that's just the start. Overhauling entire production systems means revamping supply chains, retraining workers, and upgrading existing technologies. Add America's higher labor and operational expenses, and competing with cheaper imports becomes a serious challenge. Bottom line, reshoring isn't a quick solution, and without strong, lasting policies, it won't deliver immediate relief. Markets didn't wait for the new policy to take effect. They responded in real time. In just one day, General Motors shares sank 5%, Ford lost 3%, and Stellantis trended downward. This wasn't just market noise, it reflected long-term investor anxiety. Rising production and import costs mean shrinking profits, and one auto executive even cautioned that the new tariffs could drag the whole sector into a recession. With supply chains affected at every level, this isn't just an industry problem, it threatens the entire economic value chain. Will bold promises to reshore jobs bring real results? Or will consumers bear the cost? Right now, they're paying the price, literally. Car prices are rising, incentives are disappearing, and fewer options are available at dealerships. For middle-income families, financing a new vehicle could become a heavy burden. And with new car costs rising, used car prices are climbing too. The result? A disrupted supply chain and fewer affordable choices, pushing car ownership out of reach for many Americans, the people hit hardest, everyday buyers. As production shifts and prices soar, it's regular Americans who are left struggling. And if things continue this way, the question becomes unavoidable. Is the dream of car ownership in America slipping away from the very people who built it? Trump's proposed 25% tariff on cars not made in the U.S. could spell disaster, especially for Canadian auto factories. Thousands of jobs are now in jeopardy. Could this be the beginning of the end for the automotive sector? What started as a trade policy is quickly becoming a full-scale political clash. Consider this. Over 30% of Ontario's exports come from the auto industry. That's tens of thousands of jobs in cities like Windsor, Hamilton, and Waterloo now at risk. These workers have already endured enough. They deserve protection, and Canada says it's ready to respond. Prime Minister Carney didn't mince words, calling the tariff a betrayal of the post-NAFTA trade agreement known as COSMA. He pledged a firm response. Canadian auto workers do more than build vehicles. They help build the nation. In this time of economic strain, the government is standing by them. To that end, the new Liberal government is launching the Strategic Response Fund, a $2 billion initiative designed to safeguard auto jobs. This fund will help create a fully Canadian supply chain, reduce dependence on U.S. imports, and strengthen domestic manufacturing. Canada is not only fighting back, it's adapting fast. Canada is stepping up with employment insurance, or EI, to shield workers, while also giving businesses the ability to defer taxes and access substantial liquidity packages to help them survive the economic strain. In response to U.S. actions, retaliatory tariffs are being prepared, and every dollar collected will be funneled directly back to Canadian workers who are facing growing uncertainty. Naturally, many are asking, what is Donald Trump trying to achieve? He insists that these tariffs will restore jobs in America, but economists and industry leaders argue otherwise, suggesting that no one truly wins in this scenario. The North American automotive industry has functioned as a deeply integrated system between the United States, Canada, and Mexico. Severing a link in that chain could destabilize the entire framework. Canada is standing firm. Its strategy supports nearly 500,000 citizens employed directly or indirectly in the automotive sector. It's about backing their families, uplifting communities, and strengthening the nation. That's the part President Trump seems to overlook. This fight isn't just about tariffs. Now, both nations face difficult crossroads. Canada may choose to escalate countermeasures and invest in greater economic independence, while the United States contends with a disrupted supply chain and mounting challenges. Beyond economics, the political and diplomatic ties between these two close allies are under pressure. So how will this unfold? Will Canada press forward with firm retaliation, or take a diplomatic route to protect its workers and businesses? The future of the North American automotive landscape hangs in the balance as the rift between these countries deepens. But there's a pressing question we can't ignore. Who is paying the real cost of this trade war? Workers will be the first to feel the blow. Job losses could devastate towns like Windsor, turning once thriving cities into ghost towns while families scramble to stay afloat. Even as the Canadian government works to soften the blow, the ripple effects could carry on for generations. And in the current U.S. political climate, one has to wonder, does Trump truly care about long-term prosperity? Or are these moves aimed purely at short-term political gain? In a dramatic move, Canada, once America's most reliable energy partner, has halted a $103 billion oil export pipeline to the U.S., catching Washington completely off guard. With the taps shut off, gas, oil, and electricity prices in the U.S. surged almost instantly, disrupting the everyday lives of millions. Now, Americans are grappling with rising prices on essential items, fuel, food, and public utilities. Everything from commuting to flying is becoming more expensive. The aviation industry is facing major fuel cost hikes, while shipping, manufacturing, and other sectors struggle to stay afloat amidst the energy crunch. Why did Canada take this bold step? For years, the U.S. imposed harsh trade tariffs on Canadian goods, betting that Canada wouldn't dare strike back. But that gamble has failed. Despite repeated warnings, Washington turned a blind eye. Now Canada is playing a long game. It didn't just stop oil exports to the U.S. It shifted its focus globally, signing major long-term energy deals with India and China, two of the world's largest and fastest-growing energy consumers. This is more than a political reaction. It's a strategic pivot aimed at reducing dependence on the U.S. and becoming a key player in global energy supply. Canada is actively supplying oil, gas, and electricity to nations like those in Europe and Asia, who are looking for stable, long-term alternatives, especially Europe, which is eager to move away from Russian energy. While the U.S. reels from the loss, Canada's energy export infrastructure is now adapting, redirecting flow from North America to other global markets. It's a seismic shift, one that not only shocks Washington but redefines the global energy hierarchy. Now, with Canadian hydroelectricity and oil supplies cut off, the U.S. isn't just facing an energy crisis. It's watching its strategic dominance in the global energy market begin to slip away. Canada is offering unemployment insurance to help safeguard its workforce, while also allowing businesses to delay tax payments and tap into significant liquidity support to stay afloat during these challenging times. At the same time, retaliatory tariffs are being put in place, and every cent generated from these will be redirected to Canadian workers who are facing growing instability. Naturally, many are questioning President Trump's motives. He argues that imposing tariffs will bring to America. But many experts disagree, warning that such a move could be damaging across the board. The North American auto industry has long relied on a tightly connected ecosystem involving Mexico. Disrupting one link in this chain could cause the whole system to falter. Canada is determined to stay strong. The government's actions are aimed at defending nearly 500,000 Canadians whose livelihoods are tied directly or indirectly to the automotive industry. By doing this, they're also supporting families, uplifting communities, and reinforcing the nation's economy. This, critics argue, is the bigger picture President Trump fails to grasp. This is about more than just trade. What's unfolding is no longer just a disagreement over tariffs. Both countries now stand at a difficult crossroads. Canada could intensify its retaliation and work toward economic self-reliance, while the United States contends with the fallout of a fractured supply network. The broader impact could include not just financial consequences, but a weakening of diplomatic ties between two long-standing allies. The question now is, how will this conflict play out? Will Canada hold its ground or attempt to find a diplomatic solution that safeguards both workers and industries? As tensions rise, the fate of the North American auto sector grows more uncertain, with both nations drifting further apart. One thing is becoming increasingly clear: workers are the ones paying the real price. They are the first to feel the pressure as factories shut down and towns like Windsor face the threat of economic decline. With millions left uncertain about their futures, the repercussions could stretch far beyond the present. And with political tensions escalating in the United States, people are beginning to wonder whether Trump's actions reflect a long-term vision or are merely short-term plays to gain political favor. In a striking turn, Canada, a critical United States energy partner, has ceased operations on a $103 billion oil pipeline project that once fueled America's needs. The move left Washington scrambling and triggered an immediate rise in energy prices, affecting fuel, electricity, and public utilities across the country. This sudden energy disruption is impacting Americans in their everyday lives, from the gas pump to the grocery store. Industries dependent on transportation, from airlines to freight and manufacturing, are also facing immense pressure as fuel prices skyrocket. Why did Canada make such a drastic move? After years of being targeted by United States trade tariffs, the Canadian government finally took decisive action. Despite issuing numerous warnings, Washington remained dismissive. Eventually, Canada shifted its strategy, not just to respond politically, but to lay the groundwork for long-term economic change. The country halted oil exports to the United States and began signing multi-year agreements with global giants like China and India, two of the largest and fastest-growing energy consumers. This wasn't just retaliation. It was a calculated move to reduce reliance on the United States and embrace new partnerships on the world stage. Canada's energy flow is now being redirected away from North America and toward Asia and Europe. Countries in Europe, eager to cut ties with Russian energy, and nations like China and India, in need of reliable supply, are lining up for deals. As Canada strengthens these global ties, it's positioning itself as a key supplier in the international energy market. Meanwhile, the United States faces an escalating crisis. With the loss of Canadian hydroelectricity and fuel, America's energy stability is in jeopardy. But more than that, the nation is losing its strategic footing in the global energy race, a race where Canada now has the momentum. Maria Bartiromo, once a dependable defender of Trump's economic policies, is breaking ranks. Known for backing the administration even in the face of controversy, this time she took a different stance. When the press secretary appeared on her show to explain recent tariffs, Bartiromo didn't hold back. She launched into a pointed line of questioning. At first, it was supposedly about trade. Then the issue shifted to fentanyl. After that, currency manipulation entered the conversation. And now, food testing. The message is muddled, and the inconsistency is impossible to ignore. And Bartiromo isn't alone. Many Fox viewers are growing restless, unsure if the administration has a clear economic vision or if they're just reacting in real time, scrambling for explanations. In just 1 month, the S&P 500 fell by over 7%, wiping $2.3 trillion from the market. The Dow Jones dropped nearly 1,500 points, the steepest decline all year. But perhaps even more unsettling was the effect on everyday Americans. People opened their 401(k)s only to see a 5 to 15% drop in their retirement savings. Yet despite this, the official line remained unchanged. These tariffs aren't a tax on the people, the White House claimed. They protect America from unfair trade practices. But the reality, businesses that rely on imports are hit first, and those costs are passed on to consumers. In the end, it's everyday Americans who pay more at the checkout line. Fox News, once the unified voice of support, now shows cracks. While some hosts still attempt to reassure viewers that the market is simply correcting itself after years of inflation, others continue praising Trump's economic advisors. But a growing number, including Bartiromo, can't ignore the shifting policies. She didn't mince words. Why do the explanations keep changing? The inconsistency is making it harder for both businesses and families to plan for the future. And in economics, uncertainty is the most dangerous threat of all. Meanwhile, at town halls across the country, voters are demanding answers. Why are tax breaks going to the wealthy while healthcare and social programs are being slashed? Why do costs keep rising while relief remains out of reach? More often than not, those questions are met with silence. Key Republican figures have been noticeably absent when pressed about these topics, and the silence is fueling even more distrust. Recent polling shows Trump's approval on the economy has slipped to 47%, even lower than where it stood in 2017. He remains confident. "If I hadn't been elected, this country would be finished," he declared. "Now that I am, we're on track to build the strongest economy in world history." He points to the past 4 years as proof. But reality paints a different picture. Inflation may be cooling, but it's far from stable. Costs for essentials like food, insurance, and energy continue to climb. GDP growth is dragging, barely scraping 2%, and more people are beginning to ask, where are we really headed? Is the promise to make America great again fading out of reach? Stay tuned. What comes next is what no one else dares to say about the future of the economy. As we reach the final chapter of this unfolding story, it's clear that the American economy isn't just navigating through temporary turbulence. It's undergoing a fundamental test of direction, trust, and long-term vision. From crumbling public confidence in leadership to deepening economic inequalities, we're seeing the fabric of financial stability fray under the weight of mixed messages, inconsistent policies, and political maneuvering. The heart of the issue isn't simply about tariffs, stock indices, or 401(k) losses. It's about clarity. It's about whether citizens can trust their leaders to not only speak the truth, but also follow through with strategies that genuinely reflect the needs of the people. When economic policies shift week to week, when explanations change faster than the headlines can keep up, it becomes nearly impossible for families, businesses, and investors to plan their futures. And while political spokespeople may call these fluctuations market corrections or necessary pains, the reality is more personal and more painful for average Americans. It's the young couple in Michigan putting off buying their first home. It's the retiree in Arizona watching her savings shrink. It's the small business owner in Pennsylvania unsure if he can afford to restock his inventory next quarter. These aren't just statistics. These are lives, dreams, and futures being affected, sometimes shattered by decisions made behind closed doors. The emotional toll is compounded by a growing sense that transparency has become optional, that policy is being guided less by expert insight and more by political calculation. We've heard grand speeches about economic revival. We've seen tweets that promise miracles. But we've also seen real-life indicators telling a different story. Job growth slowing, wages stagnating, essentials like food and healthcare becoming more expensive. What was once a whisper of concern has now become a nationwide echo of disillusionment. And then there's the media. For years, outlets like Fox News stood firmly behind the administration, offering unwavering support even in the face of growing dissent. But now, even among the most loyal voices, there's hesitation. Maria Bartiromo's recent questioning wasn't just journalistic curiosity, it was a sign of a deeper shift, a crack in the wall, a rare moment when even those closest to the political narrative couldn't reconcile optimism with observable reality. That moment matters. Not because it signals political betrayal, but because it reminds us that truth, however uncomfortable, must come before allegiance. If trusted voices begin to question, it opens the door for broader accountability. It means that citizens too have permission to ask, to challenge, to demand better. Meanwhile, abroad, America's trading partners are adjusting. Canada, for instance, has demonstrated that it will no longer accept being underestimated. With the decision to halt energy exports and forge new alliances with global powers like China and India, Canada is no longer just reacting, it's reshaping its future. For decades, the U.S. operated under the assumption that economic dominance was a given, but we're now entering an era where that dominance is no longer guaranteed, and allies may no longer follow without question. That shift has consequences. The global energy market is changing, supply chains are realigning. And while America debates internally, others are moving forward, solidifying their positions, building their industries, and attracting international partnerships. So where does this leave the average American? At a crossroads. Will the country double down on uncertainty, continue to mask complexity with slogans, and hope that blind optimism can substitute for clear policy? Or will it begin to confront the hard truths, acknowledging missteps, embracing transparency, and committing to long-term strategies that include all Americans, not just the wealthy few? The answers to these questions won't be found in sound bites or campaign rallies. They will be found in the lived experiences of the people, in how well families are able to support themselves, in whether job opportunities return not just to urban centers, but to forgotten rural towns, in whether young Americans believe they can still build a future better than the one their parents had. And yes, in whether the government can be trusted again, not just to say the right things, but to do the right things. What we're witnessing now is more than an economic moment. It's a societal mirror, a reflection of where we are and where we could go, if we're honest enough to face the reflection. The road ahead won't be easy, but it can still be redirected. It's not too late for leaders to listen, for policymakers to recalibrate, for media to hold power accountable, and for citizens to re-engage in shaping the direction of the country. Because at the end of the day, democracy isn't just about casting votes every 4 years. It's about participation, it's about dialogue, and it's about never being too afraid or too distracted to ask tough questions. That's where you come in. If this analysis sparked something in you, if you felt seen, concerned, frustrated, or even hopeful, then don't let the conversation stop here. We want to hear from you. What do you think about the current state of the economy? Do you feel confident in the direction we're heading? Have recent policy changes affected you personally? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. This is a conversation we all need to be part of. And if you found value in this breakdown, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss future deep dives like this. The more we talk, the more we understand. And the more we understand, the more we can shape the future we all want to live in. Thanks for watching, and stay informed, stay alert, and stay engaged.